everyone, and welcome back to Wednesday here on the Pagan Perspective. I'm your host, Eric, and this week we are talking about finding your spirituality outside of the spiritual. This week, our topic comes to us from Red Dragon 033195 and wanted to know, so I've been studying indigenous faiths and noticing some similarities in spirituality, all based on the language, such as the Proto-Indo-European Sky Father was named Deus Pater, literally meaning Sky Father or Heavenly Father. And I've been able to figure out that this deity inspired, if not the same as, Zeus, whose genitive form is Dios Lupitor. I'm assuming that's an L. Jupiter? Maybe it's an I. Nominative form from a contractive Divus and Pater, meaning divine father. Teo, or Tyr, who's... Oh, and the Dagda. I also see a lot of Eastern deities with similar attributes, and the etymological root, deo. Now, when I approach these deities today, I approach them with a completely different mindset. Using my story as an example of finding your personal deities through unspiritual ways, whether they be academic, personal, or recreational, how have you found new aspects to your spirituality? We hear a lot about how tarot cards or altars build a practice or build beliefs, but not things that have nothing to do with spirituality on the surface. I'm going to go ahead and say that all things that I do have spirituality in them, not necessarily on the surface, but I get my spirituality from life, from experiencing life, whether that be through friends and family, through reading in history, both fiction and nonfiction, and my ancestral line. That's one of the things that definitely influenced my personal practice, was the idea that my ancestors, not just my parents, but even past them and their parents and their parents and their parents, all the way back into when things were a little less politicized, and by politicized, I mean people were making stuff up as they went along instead of following what their family already did. If you go back far enough, they all become some sort of either sun and or nature worship, and I'm a fan of that idea. I really am. The sun god, or if you go back into the Norse pantheons, the sun goddess, is one of the most revered. It is one of those things where, it seems purest in that form that you are worshiping the spirit of the sun, or the spirit of, in Odin's case, the spirit of knowledge. I learned through Tacticus Germania, which is a historical, it's a really old book that was written by this Roman guy who basically wandered around the German places in Europe when Rome was at its height, and learned about all of these pagans and all of these heathens and all of these people who were not of the Roman Church or the Roman faith or whatever you want to call it. And he wrote down a bunch of stuff about the tribes and their beliefs and what they called their deity, and how they celebrated their festivals, and how they worshiped their deity, and what kind of sacrifices they did, and what kind of rituals they had. And it was a lot of information that you have to take into account that he's Roman, and he's writing about that as it's an interest for him, but it is not a spirituality or a religion for him. So you take everything with a grain of salt, but you do learn that Odin is not necessarily the god of all things. Odin is definitely a battle lord, which is basically how all of the Norse deity act, with the exception of Frigg. But that he deals with the warriors because it is a warrior culture, and everybody worshiping a deity oftentimes wants their help in battle, but Odin is most specifically a god of knowledge and learning. So scholars and people who write things down are going to be the ones who worship Odin more than anyone else, which is why I am an Odinist. That's not, it's not to say that I don't think Thor has a great, following or doesn't deserve a great following or anything, but I happen to be an Odinist because I do value learning and knowledge, and I believe that knowledge is power, and therefore I believe that Odin is a more powerful god than Thor, and that would be the only reason why. Not because he gets to choose half the dead, which I don't know why he gets half and Freya gets the other half, but, that's something I'll continue to research. So that's just one example of how reading the histories and looking into the past, although that in and of itself was done for spiritual purposes, the looking into the past is not a spiritual practice per se. It's something that everybody does simply so they can find out who they are and where they came from. Another thing that has definitely tilted my practice into a different direction than it otherwise would have taken is my ability and my need to see runes everywhere. I don't remember where the idea came from. I don't remember if it was something that I found in and of myself, or if it was something that just struck me completely out of the blue, that I was walking around or driving around or whatever the hell I was doing at the time, and it came to me, oh, hey, that looks exactly like this rune. And then I started actively looking for them, and the ability or the desire to pull those signs out of my surroundings is something that definitely affects my spirituality. It reminds me on a regular basis without having to actively seek out spiritual experiences. Those experiences come to me just visually as I move through the world. So that is something that personal gnosis, research, and that research is not necessarily research as in I intend to do research and read the histories and the lore and the whatnot. Sometimes you get insights into yourself and into society and into even maybe what the gods were like or are like by reading fiction. And sometimes I will be reading about, like, what's a good example? The Belgariad. I don't know if any of you have read the Belgariad, but apparently it's a classic fiction that I'm just getting into. One of the main characters, Belgarath, is the sorcerer. He's the old guy wizard. He lives forever, kind of a thing. So in that matter, he does seem a little bit like Odin, and I would assume that some of the personality traits that Belgarath has are really similar to a lot of the character traits or the personality traits that I associate with Odin. So it kind of helps understand how that interaction would be, or how that interaction can be when you're dealing directly with deity. You don't ask for anything that you can deal with yourself, kind of a thing. Anyway, so a lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of keeping my eyes open, and definitely those things are not overtly spiritual, but you can take spiritual things out of them. Anyway, so I just wanted to share a couple of these, and hopefully that covers your topic. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns for me, feel free to post those in the comment section below. But that is it for me this week, everybody. Thanks for watching, and of course, until next time, Odin be with you.